Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the news that might keep Nigel Farage complaining for a few more months. Labour's manifesto was really clear that second jobs divert time away from MPs doing their proper jobs. It's not just about conflicts of interest with certain jobs, but that is a serious issue. But even just the time spent having a second career, as well as being an MP, means you're not doing your best for your constituents, because being an MP should be a full-time job. And reforms were promised in the manifesto, but the promise came in two parts. The first was an initial move on lobbying jobs, but then a wider review on other types of second job. And in the interests of transparency and cross-party engagement, Labour have set up a new committee to do this with MPs from multiple parties. The modernisation committees, there's been modernisation committees in the past, and this is drawing on members from Labour, the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats. It's going to be run by Labour's Lucy Powell and is tasked with modernising aspects of parliamentary procedures, specifically to try and avoid future scandals. The general aim of Labour's plan here is to try and restore trust in politics. This committee's job is to work on rules to make MPs behave themselves better in the public eye. And one of their jobs will be deciding which second jobs either present a conflict of interest and so shouldn't be allowed, or are just not beneficial to the public in general. And a specific type of second job that has attracted criticism in recent times is hosting television shows. Now, there are arguments, of course, about why it's potentially fine for a politician to host an LBC phone-in show of the sort that, say, David Lammy and even recently Suella Braverman have done, Jacob Rees-Mogg's done. And they've not really attracted criticism because essentially, although they're technically hosting, all they're doing is taking questions from the public. However, when you look at some of the shows on, say, GB News, hosted by Jacob Rees-Mogg or Nigel Farage, they're presenting their own unchallenged views, sometimes echoed by other politicians who share the same narrow views on their own shows. There's no counter to it. So it's just them platforming. They're basically like party political broadcasts. But maybe the obvious answer would be, rather than to have a nuanced argument about which ones are fine and which ones aren't, just ban the practice altogether. And that is something the committee are looking at. Now, this might be a bit of a problem for Nigel Farage because, let's face it, he's not exactly doing much as an MP, is he? It still appears he can't work out how to vote. I accused him yesterday of not voting to scrap the winter fuel payments. He didn't show up on the voting. He has now shown up on there, making me look like a bit of a prawn, except I will still say if it took 24 hours for him to appear on the list, it means he messed up voting again, not for the first time. All you have to do is swipe a card, mate. How hard is it? Everyone else manages it. So what's clearly happened is he said, I was there voting. And he'll have got a few witnesses who said, yeah, he was about somewhere. And they've agreed to put him on the list now. So he can't work out how to vote. He's only on record as voting 3 times so far. I know Parliament hasn't been in session that long, but there's been way more than 3 votes. He doesn't turn up to Parliament very often in general. I still don't think he's actually been to his constituency yet. You could be forgiven for thinking that being an MP is just another grift for him, but one that doesn't pay anywhere near as much as his GB News gig. And although he may find a loophole if the committee does ban hosting your own shows, such as, for example, getting someone else to host it, but having him on as a permanent guest, well, GB News has got money troubles anyway. Like, they're making losses of tens of millions a year. They're now going to be less relevant because they won't be able to get government ministers on their show. Frankly, the Tories should never have agreed to go on themselves. It only fed Reform UK. It was an act of madness on their part, but a madness that Labour don't seem to share. So it would only cost GB News more money in order to get around any restrictions that new rules could introduce. But let's say the committee did decide that hosting TV shows was not in the public's interest. Let's say they were always also wise to any potential loopholes that might make a mockery of the restrictions, you know, like being a permanent guest with someone else pretending to be the host. And none of this is a given. It's just something the committee is going to be considering. What would Farage do then? Because assuming GB News doesn't just collapse under its own weight anyway, due to the complete lack of a business model, you know, let's say that Farage's precious free market Capitalism doesn't finish him. I can't imagine he wants to give up his television jobs in order for the much smaller pay from being an MP. We can be sure he will kick up a massive fuss if the committee even looks like taking the idea seriously. Oh, he will shout, he will cry, he will stamp his little feet about being cancelled, a political witch hunt, the full works, although there's no reason why any of that should really have any impact on the committee. If the Conservatives especially manage to work out that GB News and Farage exist to make their party weaker, if they would just come to that realisation, then even they may not object to moves against second jobs in broadcasting or journalism in general. In fact, Nigel Farage's most prized asset over the years has been the naivety of too many politicians, often in the Conservative Party. We often talk about how populists like Farage con voters with lies, but he's done it with MPs as well. He's convinced Conservative MPs to act against their own interests. If they ever woke up to this fact, he'd be finished. And although I would support a very wide-ranging ban on second jobs for MPs, with only a very few exceptions for practical reasons, I must confess, I would enjoy seeing Nigel Farage turning up to Parliament to whine about why he should be allowed to keep his lucrative broadcasting job, only to be challenged about his lack of work as an MP. Because Nigel Farage is a perfect example of why MPs should not have secondary paid employment. He's become an MP, but he hasn't reduced the hours he spends on his pre-existing jobs. Now, he was fairly busy beforehand, right? So how can you carry on with your busy careers and be an MP on top? So as a result, he isn't active in his constituency, doesn't even visit. He rarely attends Parliament, only doing so when he thinks there's a good chance that his presence will make it on the news. He has only voted 3 times and on at least 2 occasions managed to mess up the voting, which, like I say, takes the form of getting a card and going. Sure, it takes a while for new MPs to properly gear up, but Farage's efforts have been pathetic. And if he doesn't drop some of his prior commitments, he's not going to have time to be an MP. You could actually present an entire argument about the need for reform of moonlighting for MPs, based entirely on the case of Nigel Farage, even though the concept arose before he ever became an MP, because pre-existing MPs, mostly but not exclusively Tories, have been the source of a lot of scandals related to those extra jobs. I'd also love to get to a point where Farage had to choose between being an MP and being a broadcaster. I strongly suspect I know which way he would jump, and the ensuing sulk would be worthy of the most spoiled of toddlers. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.